Coffee and Crypto with Lee and Jimmy. I am Lee Reiners, joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Jimmie Lenz. Good afternoon,
Hello,
Jimmy.
Lee. How you doing today?
I am doing well. Once again, no shortage of topics to dive into, so let's just do
Let's
it,
just
man.
dive in. Dive
All
into
right.
the deep end.
Dive into the deep end. You know who else dove into the deep end? PayPal. Our good friends at PayPal. And I'm sure most of our listeners know this, but in case you don't, PayPal also owns Venmo. So I think our younger audience is probably more familiar with Venmo. But on Monday, this past Monday morning, PayPal announced that they were going to launch their own US dollar stablecoin that is going to be fully backed by US dollar deposits, short-term treasuries, and similar cash equivalents. This is going to be known as PYUSD, PayUSD. I haven't heard anyone actually pronounce it. So it's PYUSD. So what are people calling this? PayUSD, PayUSD,
PayUSD.
PayUSD. Okay, that makes sense. And PayUSD is going to be issued by the New York-based crypto financial services firm Paxos. So Paxos is actually registered as a trust company under New York law and subject to regulation under the BIT license there in New York. So it's sort of a kind of a co-branded type of enterprise there. So that's the background. Jimmy, let me turn it over to you for thoughts and reactions.
I think it's such a natural fit. I mean, this is a payments company. This is what they do for a living, right? Is they facilitate electronic payments, and they're huge, and they've been around for a long time. They're not dissimilar to some of the other giant payment companies. Think Visa, think MasterCard, think places like that. Stripe, Square. I mean, they're very, very. Although Square's not Square anymore; it's Block now. But
yeah, well, it is. Twitter's not Twitter either. Yeah, things change.
It is really interesting though. I think for them to do this, and I see this as kind of multifaceted. So definitely, it's a payment. It's for payments and things like that. This will help facilitate things. It will probably cut down on a lot of their transactional things as far as different currencies. But it also provides an off ramp for a lot of people. I could see this very easily becoming, because so many people use PayPal now, a very, very simple and easy and available off-ramp for people that want to go from crypto to USD or something denominated in USD.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, at this point, I have probably more questions about this whole thing than I do like concrete thoughts. Starting with, so Venmo is already a stable coin, right? Or PayPal is already a stable coin. So just, they're very similar, right? So PayPal lets people pay each other with a digital representation of reserve money that's held by the company, right? That's already what it is. PayPal and Venmo, they're not a bank, okay? You log into, you have the app, you look at your Venmo app, you see a balance, right? But that is not the same thing as looking at your bank account balance, your checking account balance, your savings account balance, right? That's just your digital wallet balance. And then PayPal and Venmo, they're holding, at a bank account somewhere, or somewhere else, the actual dollars that support that. And so that's why you're able to, I'm able to send you a Venmo and it'll show up in your Venmo wallet instantly, right?
Right.
But if you want to withdraw to your bank account, then it's the standard, ACH, 3 days nonsense, right?
Takes you forever.
Exactly. So, so the way it's structured now, Venmo really already is, and PayPal already is.
But you can't
a stable coin. There's just not a block. I guess there's just no blockchain now. So
there's no blockchain, and there's no exchange, right? You can't go from an exchange to PayPal. And so if I have, Bitcoin and I want to swap it for a US dollar denominated stablecoin, I could use this now. And what does that do? It increases the size of their ecosystem.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the key point, right? The size of their ecosystem. This is a entry point into, bigger things in crypto, perhaps, be it DeFi, whatever it may be.
Well, and so think of all the things you can use PayPal. I mean, PayPal's almost like a credit card, right? I mean, you can use PayPal to pay for a lot of things. There are a lot of places that accept PayPal, convenience stores, gas stations, things like that. Well, so I'm going to go back to an example I've used before, truck coin swap. So say you have truck coin swap tokens, and those are great, but you can't fill up your truck with those, right?
Yeah.
But I could swap those very easily for the new PayPal tokens, and voila, I fill up my truck. So it's a kind of a nice off ramp for people who either want to do something like that, or people that just it just makes it easier.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, listen, this PayUSD is going to run on the Ethereum network.
Yep.
I think that the key regulatory issue with frankly all stablecoins is, what do you do about the unhosted wallet situation? In essence, I can go to PayPal now. Let's say they launch this thing. They're going to vet me just like a bank would vet me for purposes of know your customer, anti-money laundering regulations. But if it's on a public permissionless blockchain, I'll be able to send it to any wallet anywhere, and there'll be no vetting in essence of that. Now, they will have the ability to, just like Tether and Circle have the ability to seize or freeze certain addresses. So this is not, by any means like the crypto nirvana that many people are sort of building it up to be. But that's still a huge regulatory risk. Probably one of the reasons they're partnering with Paxos, because frankly, as the issuer, that risk largely falls on them. And we've seen Paxos be in the crosshairs of regulators in the very recent past with BUSD. I mean, in essence, this is just replacing BUSD, the Binance branded Paxos issued stable coin. So there's a lot of legal and regulatory risk involved here. So it'll be really curious to see how it all plays out.
I mean, from a business standpoint, I got to say, I think it's a nice move for them. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, they made the decision. It's worth it. Yeah, they this is what businesses do, right? They say, okay, what are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the costs? You're going to incorporate regulatory risk, legal risk into that. And so they made, this is a calculated decision. They're no dummies. They've been around a long, long time.
They've been around a long time. They've grown to be, I mean, they're a stalwart in the industry. They are, for sure. They are a major payments company.
More than 400 million active users. That's a lot. That's a huge customer base.
Yeah. Figure that's bigger than the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Some things are. And you can already buy crypto on, I think Venmo and PayPal already started letting you buy crypto a few years ago too. I don't think it's a big chunk of their business. Another question I had, Jimmy, is, what does this do now for potential other big tech firms entry into stablecoin, right? I mean, we all remember Facebook and Libra. PayPal, again, they're not a bank. They're really a tech company at heart, right? And we've seen, other tech companies get into payments or try to get into payments. Obviously, there's Apple Pay, right? There's Google Pay. Facebook tried to launch their own, stable coin a while ago. And so if PayPal's successful here, does this mean that we're going to start to see other tech branded stable coins?
I mean, we've already seen a couple of the other payment companies. We know they're working with it. I mean, there have been some announcements from Visa and MasterCard about, doing more in the space. Will we see more tech companies? Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're going to be, as we see more and more companies wanting to tokenize different kinds of assets and things like that, we're going to see more tech companies enter this realm. I mean, it's a natural. It's one of the growth industries that we have right now. And so are more people going to get in there and see how many times you can slice that onion? Absolutely.
For sure.
I think we will see more.
And I have, in historically in this country, by law, we've separated banking from commerce. And I think there's very good policy reasons to do that. Now, as I said before, PayPal is not a bank, and kind of payments is sort of the one area where you can get cross this boundary between banking and commerce, if you will. And so I have concerns around basically PayPal being too big to fail. Because right now they hold 35.
I know you and I, because
we have similar,
Yeah.
I think we're of similar mind on this, on these too big to fail issues, right? So, right now PayPal currently holds around $35 billion of customer balances. So these, let's be clear what these are. These are uninsured liabilities that are payable on demand and functionally equivalent to checking deposits.
Yeah.
So PayPal's issuance of
payable.
Yeah, so PayPal's issuance of stablecoins is just going to create an additional uninsured payable on demand liability. And what happens if there's some type of issue at PayPal, whatever it may be, operational risk, a run, you name it, and they're unable to make good on their liabilities. I mean, they could really disrupt our payment system and trigger a financial crisis in a way that, let's be honest. I mean, if Circle goes down, yes, it's bad for a lot of people in crypto, and they almost did go down with the Silicon Valley Bank situation. But it's not probably going to be like a systemic risk event. PayPal is different. PayPal is different. So if the Treasury and the Fed feel compelled to bail out PayPal's uninsured payable on demand,
kind of like they do with the liabilities,
kind of like what they did with the banks, like they did with money market funds, right?
Yeah,
twice, 2008, 2020.
Yep.
What are the implications there? Right. So I have concerns.
Yeah. I think those concerns are really valid. I know we talked about a couple of other things that we might chat about today. And I think this goes very squarely into that area. I mean, one of the things that I've written about a lot and I've talked about a lot is the concentration of risks that we have. We have 5,000 plus banks in the United States, 5,000 plus credit unions in the United States, and yet the vast majority of deposits are concentrated in about 5 banks.
Yeah.
If that's not a systemic risk, I don't know what one is. That is probably one of the riskiest things there is. And when people talk about, we have this risk, we have that risk, are you kidding? We have all the assets of the wealthiest nation in the world in 5 banks, basically. That's risky. That's really freaking risky.
Well, and it proves the thesis, right? Because the reason they have so many deposits is because people move them there because they believe that they're too big to fail, and therefore their money will always be good. The government will always backstop them if these banks get into trouble, right? You saw this happen in the wake of Silicon Valley Bank.
We've seen it happen.
Money. Everyone moved their money to Chase and to JP, to Bank of America, right? All the uninsured deposits fled to the too big to fail, man.
Yeah. I mean, that is what happens. And
the only way to break this psychology is to, guess what? Actually let one of them
banks
fail.
Let them fail. I mean, this
easier said than done, though. Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. But this administration has shown, a few times now, they will not do that. They will not they want to, and you've heard me say it before. Privatize the gains and nationalize the losses.
Yeah, but it's not. It's every listen,
but this
2008 was the George Bush, the W. Bush administration. When Continental Illinois, who was president?
Illinois,
Reagan was Reagan.
Savings and loan before
what
that.
What year was that? That was 87.
I don't know. In the 80s for sure. Yeah.
We need a producer. They can feed us this. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. You and I have discussed the SVB situation before. I think we're of like mind there. The information that's come out since that has only reaffirmed, my views. I probably your views when you saw the list of the top 10 uninsured depositors.
Yeah.
This was essentially a bailout of Silicon Valley, the tech industry, big tech.
Sure.
So this is interesting. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on this as it develops. But I think, like a lot of things in crypto, there's probably more symbolic significance than immediate significance here.
I would agree. This is a significant move by a major payments company into this space. I think it signifies the fact that crypto's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. They're putting they have to be putting a huge investment in doing something like this. I mean, this didn't come cheap. So they're putting a lot of efforts into it. And, and we're continuing to hear, JP Morgan, we're hearing, BlackRock, we're hearing, Citadel, Vanguard, all these companies that, and I think that it substantiates the asset class for sure. It is just not going anywhere. Regardless of what happens, it is not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. And like you said, the drumbeat of traditional financial institutions getting into crypto is just getting louder and louder, right? And and PayPal is just the latest manifestation of that. And we're going to see more, and we'll talk about it on Coffee and Crypto. All right, so let's move on to a similar subject. So we've talked about the House Financial Services Committee, working on a couple of crypto bills. The two big ones are a bill to regulate stablecoins and a bill to regulate, crypto market structure. In essence, crypto trading, right, in primary and secondary markets. Both of those bills recently passed out of committee. The crypto market structure bill was passed out of both the House Financial Services Committee and the Agriculture Committee. Right. And the stablecoin bill was passed out of the House Financial Services Committee. This was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago at this point, I think. Now it goes to the full House. I don't know. I'm not in the politics of this thing day to day. Presumably at some point, it'll come to a full House vote, whether or not that's probably not in a standalone bill, but maybe attached to a bigger bill. Listen, both of these bills are DOA as they are in the Senate. But nonetheless, this is definitely, some momentum for the crypto industry. I have some major concerns with both of these bills. And the stablecoin bill was kind of interesting how this played out, because that was sort of the one topic where you were sort of hearing from both sides that
bipartisan support.
Yeah, bipartisan support. And, and the ranking member, Maxine Waters, was, sort of, and I think, and Patrick McHenry, he is, he's really astute. I mean, he knows the subject matter, inside and out. He cares about policy, right? I mean, I think he is not in this for, political gamesmanship. Right. He is really in this for achieving policy outcomes. And I think he really did want to, work with Democrats on this. And I think that was reciprocated. For whatever reason, they just couldn't get there on the stablecoin bill. Apparently the actual hearing to mark up the bill in the House Financial Services Committee was very contentious. There was yelling and all sorts of stuff. There's been some reporting that it was really the White House who kind of came in at the last minute and got the Democrats to back off on the stablecoin bill, but it still got like 5, I think, Democratic votes.
Yeah,
so,
it did.
It's a
bipartisan
support. A shame. Yeah, I mean, depends on how you want to define it, but it got, both of these bills got, I think the stablecoin bill got 5 Democratic votes. The market structure bill got 6 Democratic votes. So, that's kind of the summary there. I don't really have much, detailed thoughts on it. I mean, this going back to the PayPal stablecoin, I saw both Chairman McHenry and Ranking Member Waters issue statements sort of saying, well, PayPal doing this is evidence of, in McHenry's case, why we need to pass the stablecoin bill, and in Waters' case, why the stablecoin bill is flawed. So, typical DC spin, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I applaud, everybody, because they do seem to be moving things forward. They do seem to be moving things, which, unlike a lot of committees, I think, I second your thoughts around Congressman McHenry. He has probably been the probably one of the driving forces on the House Financial Services Committee, one of the strongest driving forces we've seen in years. He is moving things ahead, whether you like him, whether you hate him. He is moving things ahead. He is moving things through that committee. And it's like every week you see stuff coming out of there. Yeah. I mean, I've never seen this before, and I've been in financial services for a long time. I've never seen this amount of activity occur. So I think it speaks volumes about his leadership in the space. And honestly, as you said, one of the things, and his leadership is way beyond this, but this is, he's been a real student of digital assets. And I don't know if he's the most well-informed, but I would say if he's not the most well-informed, he's one of the top 2 or 3 in Congress today.
It's not just digital assets too; it's finance. I mean, he is a subject matter expert when it basically comes to anything that goes in front of that committee. Which
hey, you know what? He should be. Right? I mean, he's leading the House Financial Services Committee. Everybody who leads those kinds of roles, and that's not often the case, right? A lot of these times, these are political roles, but this is a little bit different.
Well, I mean, I would just point to his counterpart in the Senate, Recently, well, I guess, obviously Sherrod Brown is the chair, but, you look at the ranking member over there is Republican Tim Scott, and he took over as ranking member relatively recently.
Yep.
And guess what he decided to do? Run for president.
Yep.
I'm not saying, listen, I think it's pretty clear to everyone that, Patrick McHenry knows a lot more about certainly digital assets, and I would say finance in general, than Senator Scott. Now, Senator Scott,
yes.
Is a smart guy and has worked in insurance and whatnot, but but I think he has greater political ambitions that prevent him from sort of diving into the subject matter and really caring about moving legislation. So hat tip to Chairman McHenry, even though I disagree with him on the substance of both these bills. But nonetheless,
I know, but
nonetheless,
but
I appreciate the fact that he cares, that he knows, and and he actually wants to work across the aisle.
And he is one of our state's congressmen too, which is kind of
true.
Nice.
He's a proud North Carolinian.
North Carolinian
from Hickory. All right, so that brings us to a couple of announcements from the good old Federal Reserve Board of Governors there.
He did have a few announcements lately
in Washington D.C. So two related announcements. The first was the creation of a new program on the supervision of what the Fed is calling novel risk or novel activities. And of course, novel activities presumably present novel risk. And so this is a program that is going to focus on crypto, banks engaging in crypto assets activity, distributed ledger technology, and complex technology-driven partnerships with non-banks. So that's kind of the summary. I mean, really what they're saying is that they're going to incorporate their supervision of these novel risks into their existing supervisory process. So this is not going to necessarily be like a standalone kind of annual exercise or something like that. Presumably, this means that they are going to increase hiring or create people that have, this is sort of my question, right? And as someone who used to be an examiner. So this is like stuff that I perhaps would have done back if I was still
back in the day.
Back in the day. That's right. Well, we don't disclose ages on this podcast. Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is an issue for government in general. How do you get the people that have the skill set when you're competing with the private sector that just has the ability to pay a lot more? And so that's kind of one of the questions I have here is, where is the Fed going to get the staff to do this work? And I think it is necessary work, right? But I just don't know, where you're going to get the people from.
I think there are. I mean, that's certainly a concern. The people to do this work is certainly a concern. I think for any sort of examination, right, having people that have the experience, have the context to do it. You can't hire people straight out of school that have never worked at a bank before.
Unless they're masters in fintech engineering graduates from Duke University.
That's a given, though.
Yeah, of course.
But I think for the bill or the rule itself, the proposal itself is, are these novel risks? Yeah, I suppose they are novel risks, but there are a lot of novel risks out there, and we just talked about one. This huge risk that I think is just so pervasive around the size of these organizations, the complexity of these organizations. Yeah. NPR did a special, this has to be like 5 years ago, on reading a bank's annual report and their 10K, and nobody could figure it out. I mean, they had audit firms in there trying to, they couldn't figure it out. And so, and I think that speaks volumes. The complexity of these places, how large they've grown, the number of businesses, and in particular, since Glass-Steagall has fallen, right? If you look at any major brokerage firm in America, almost every one of them is owned by a bank. I think that's,
a bank holding company.
A bank holding company. And so I think you have a lot of things that are tied up in this. I think as staff to do this kind of work, that's going to be difficult to find. But I think when they're looking at novel risks, they need to look at, a much bigger. It's like they're missing the forest for the trees. I really do.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And, listen, they obviously missed on Silicon Valley Bank, right? I mean, that was a supervisory failure. No doubt about
massive,
it. And
massive failure.
Listen, anytime a bank fails, blame first and foremost lies with management. Okay. So I'm not absolving, SVB's management. But listen, Fed examiners, and their Fed was the primary supervisor, San Francisco Fed of SVB, they dropped the ball. They missed it. So it doesn't really, given that history, not inspiring confidence here when it comes to this new supervisory program. So like everything in life and in business, right? It's all about execution. You can have the best plan and the best intention in the world, but it's all meaningless if you can't execute it, right?
Well, and if you can't execute on what you're supposed to be doing, and what your mandate is, should you be expanding that mandate? And I'm gonna call in something else here.
Yes.
The SEC recently fined about a dozen brokerage firms for basically their communications. A very, very basic thing. The way that they were using texting and stuff like that.
They're using WhatsApp and LinkedIn Messenger, and you have to, the basic rule is you have to record.
You have to record.
Banks and brokerages have to record employee communications.
Yeah, and they have to keep it for, depending on what it is, for up to 7 years, right? Yeah. In a easily searchable form. Well, they weren't keeping any of it. And so they fined them $500 and some million among these banks.
Yeah.
This has been the SEC's mandate for almost a century, is to regulate brokerage firms. These are retail brokerage firms for the most part. This is this is their mandate. This is what they're meant to do, and they can't even do that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was one firm, right? It was what
are they supposed to do? Like they can't, if some investment banker decides to, send a client a note via WhatsApp, I mean, what do you want the SEC to do there?
Well, what I want them to do is do a lot
be a
more
nanny state?
Yeah, well, no, but whenever they hand out one of those, hold somebody accountable. So when they fine brokerage firms, who does that really fine? It fines shareholders. The only person that hurts is shareholders. Period. End of story. Is anybody held accountable? So you just saw that. It was 11 brokerage firms. Is one person being held accountable? I guarantee you hold the CEO.
Not by the government.
You hold the CEO of each one of those brokerage firms responsible individually. I guarantee you that'll change next week.
Okay.
I guarantee that will change next week.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir here on the sentiment about executive accountability, which Lord knows we need a lot more of.
Yeah.
But I have to kind of push back a little bit on this specific issue, because you think that Jamie Dimon should face jail time because some junior employee sent a message on LinkedIn or Twitter DM or whatever. I mean, come on, that's.
You think Jamie Dimon would be a little stricter around supervision if he knew that was a possibility? I mean, really?
Yeah,
I think not like these guys. It's not like. I think brokerage firms are small places, especially retail brokerage firms. These are operate as small offices, hundreds of them around the country. You don't think every branch manager knew that guys were using WhatsApp? If the branch managers themselves weren't doing it, hold a couple of people accountable.
Listen, I can't argue. I'm not going to argue with the sentiment because I agree with the sentiment. I agree with the sentiment. I just don't know how big. The reason. And it's not as if the SEC or any regulatory body is looking into employee communications in real time. It comes in handy for This is an investigative tool, right? If there's like market manipulation, insider trading, I mean, you name it. Then you need to be able to look at the communication records for investigative purposes. That's the point. It's not as if regulators are looking at this stuff in real time, pouring through employee messages, right? They use it to supplement investigations
and things like that. But remember,
you need it. I mean,
this is also a way that you capture orders. This is a way if there's any sort of dispute with a client, this is the means by which you settle those disputes.
It's important.
Absolutely.
It's 100%. It's 100% important. It doesn't shock me.
Everybody knows it's illegal. Everybody. There is not one person using WhatsApp. Absolutely, they all know. There is. You see that 50 times When you take your FINRA exams, you see it. You see it on your bulletins. When you do your continuing education,
well, you've worked in the industry,
So. I worked in the industry and I had almost every principal license you can have. So I took a lot of freaking tests. I had to do the CLEs every year. Never had one complaint against me in my many decades in financial services. That's free for anybody to go look at. You can go check me out on Broker Chat.
I got a few to add. So,
but I'm serious. Everybody knows this is legal.
No, that's a good point. And listen, the SEC's been cracking down on this for the past year or so. So this is just the latest batch of firms. I'm sure there's going to be more. So all you listeners out there working at a regulated financial institution, stop using WhatsApp and encrypted messaging. Okay, it's not good. We need to be able, and to bringing it to back to the world of crypto. One of the issues when you're trying to figure out how do you regulate a new asset class, a new market, is how do you incorporate these type of surveillance abilities, right? To piece together, they called it the tape back with the securities, right? So, if you see, market manipulation, if you see anomalous activity, trading activity, pricing, whatever, where do you go? Now, obviously people in crypto would say, well, the blockchain is fully transparent, this and that. But, as you and I know, right, when you go to these platforms, there's not corresponding, you trade there's not corresponding trades on the blockchain. They're just trading out of an omnibus account. So, so nonetheless, this has developed over decades in the traditional securities context, market surveillance, things like that. But again, not the best sign here when we look ahead to crypto and how we regulate that.
Well, yeah.
All right. Well, that was a fun little detour there. All right. So the other back to the Fed, our friends at the Fed. So in addition to the new program for novel risk, the Fed also weighed in on tokenization. And Jimmie, I really want to. I'm just going to put this on the agenda for a future episode. I really want to dive into tokenization because there's a lot of interesting stuff happening, and so much of what we have to do is just on this episode in this show is just respond to like what's going on in the news. But there's a lot happening in the world of tokenization, and so I wanted to dive into that in the future. But so basically, what the Fed is coming out and saying here, and this is a new what they call SR letter, supervisory letter, and it's essentially guidance that the Fed sends to banks that it regulates, and it says, okay, these are some concerns we have. These are expectations for you around these concerns, and we're sort of going to be looking into this and potentially issuing things like matters requiring attention and whatnot. Although there's a whole sort of legal debate around whether SR letters carry the force of law or not, but we'll table that. So, basically the Fed is reiterating some of what it said previously around banks engaging in digital asset activities. And this messaging is similar across the federal regulatory agencies, Fed, OCC, FDIC. And the message is basically this. Look, if you're a regulated bank and you want to engage in digital asset activities, you need to get permission from us first. And some of the regulators actually say you need to get written permission from us first. And so the Fed is sort of doubling down on that policy stance, in particular when it comes to what they call dollar token activities. Tokenized deposits. You don't really tokenize anything, but I think the relevant thing is stablecoins, tokenized deposits. They say, listen, you're going to have to obtain a written notification of supervisory non-objection if you want to do this. You have to have adequate systems in place to identify, measure, monitor, and control the risk of tokenization. And here are some of the risks that we're concerned about and are going to be looking into. One, operational risk. So risk associated with the governance and oversights of the network. Lord knows we've seen plenty of governance issues on permissionless blockchain networks. Cybersecurity risk. Liquidity risk. So this is the risk that the dollar token could experience substantial redemptions in a short period of time. So a run. Illicit finance risk. So compliance with the BSA and the foreign asset control requirements. And then consumer compliance
Maybe they
risk.
would actually be successful with digital assets because they've been dreadfully unsuccessful with USD. So maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll work with digital assets, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's funny if you actually look at some of the largest fines ever levied against banks.
They're all BSA and AML. All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
And there isn't a major bank in the world that hasn't gotten one of those fines. There hasn't been any. So they've all been, And maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe they just figure, it's the cost of doing business. I don't know.
I think they do.
Yeah.
So I don't really have much thoughts on this. I mean, because again, it's reiterating a lot of what the Fed and other regulators have already said. It's very clear that the bank regulators really, really, really do not want banks to engage in crypto activities.
Yeah.
And, they always take great pains and they did this as well in their SR letter for the new supervisory program, or I don't think it was a SR letter, but there's their statement on it. And they say, in essence, look, we're not saying that, banks can't engage in activity that's legal, right? Because this is the whole crypto industry, Operation Choke Point 2.0 talking point.
Right.
Right. So they're saying, listen, you can still do it. I mean, it's legal. However, we have some serious reservations and concerns.
Yeah.
And that sends a message, right? I mean, come on, like no one wants to piss off crypto doesn't seem to mind, but in general, banks try to avoid pissing off their primary regulator, right?
I think they do try to do that. Although I think banks are they're looking for new markets. They're certainly looking for new products. In particular, those banks we talked about earlier that own brokerage firms. They see that their assets have stagnated in most cases, or even dropping. Their clients are getting older. The average age of someone at a brokerage firm now is probably around retirement age. That's the average, by the way, folks. Kind of the same as their financial advisor, is about the same. If you don't believe me, just look it up. It's true. But they're trying, and they need to get, what's the next generation? Well, the next generation isn't flocking to brokerage firms, and they know that. And so they're trying to say, okay, what do we do to bring this next generation in? And they've already seen how popular digital assets are with younger folks. I mean, they're massively popular. And so if I want to attract those, I have to have the assets that they're interested in. And so banks are not going to stop. This might slow them down. This will not stop them. Absolutely. The writing is on the wall.
Yeah. We'll see. Obviously, it's going to all depend on, customers and customer demand. And if customer demand continues to grow, banks are going to, continue to wade into the crypto waters, regulatory dictate be damned, right?
Right.
And that's just the way it's always been. So another thing I wanted to talk about, Jimmy, and this is I'm adding this. This is an impromptu agenda item. I didn't,
we don't really have an agenda.
Well, all we do, so just so folks know, all of this is completely unscripted, right? All that happens.
I don't think that's a stretch for anybody.
People are gonna be like, yeah, like no, duh, we listen. But I send you basically the night before or even the day of. I'll just send you like a list, right? Yeah. Just bulleted list. I'll say, hey, I think these are kind of the topics we should talk about, and you say, okay, right? Yeah. But that's it. That's the extent of it. So that's it. So I am adding a new item to the list because it's related to what we've talked about in the past, and of course another big crypto story, which is the Ripple decision by Judge Torres and the district court in the Southern District of New York. And, again, I think folks are familiar that, that was a motion for summary judgment where Judge Torres agreed with the SEC on the institutional sales of XRP constituted investment contracts and were therefore an unregistered security. But
which was the initial offering.
The initial offering. And then she actually sided with Ripple on what were known as the programmatic sales. So these were secondary offerings on secondary exchanges, and the other, which is basically Ripple paying employees and other vendors and whatnot in Ripple. So she said that those two were not investment contracts. So we have a now intra-district dispute. So there was another case, the SEC versus Terraform. And Duquan, and I think listeners are going to be familiar with the Terra Luna situation and all that stuff. Again, in that case, the SEC is alleging that Terra and Luna were securities, and Judge Jed Rakoff, who's a kind of a legendary jurist who really has ruled on a number of prominent finance related cases. explicitly called out Judge Torres's ruling and said that he disagreed with the programmatic sales decision of that, and that in essence, it didn't really matter for purposes of Howey analysis, whether or not the purchaser knew who they were buying it from, in essence. So that takes a little wind out of the sails of the crypto industry. Relatedly, the SEC just announced yesterday, sent a letter to Judge Torres announcing their intention to appeal her ruling, and obviously this was going to happen anyway. But now that we have a dispute between two district court judges in the same district, it's only going to be able to be settled by the circuit court. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, the logic there just doesn't follow. I mean, and I've read Howey. I don't think Howey applies. I don't even think it should apply to anything anymore. It's 100 years old. The world's changed in 100 years. It's ridiculous that we still use that. But even if that were the case, I mean, when I think of securities, and I think everybody does, they think that one of two things: either it's an obligation, a bond, or it's a share ownership. An equity stake, or a debt stake in a company. And I've never seen any crypto that's either. I've never seen one that's a debt stake. I've seen DeFi contracts, but those are different. I've never seen one that's a debt. No, pays a dividend. You have a lien on any asset if it went under. I've never seen that. And I've never seen a company say, oh yeah, you have equity in this. Yeah. I mean, just as somebody who's been in the industry for a long freaking time, I'm not a jurist, I'm not a lawyer, but I know, how these things work, and I know the way people think about them. And in the case of Judge Torres, in particular in the secondary market, yeah, of course. I mean, it's I do a lot of expert witness stuff too. And sometimes I'll see people and they'll rebut my stuff, and it's like, has this person ever actually worked in the industry? And I would say the same for these jurists. It's like, take a step back and just think about this. Don't look at a definition that's 100 years old, that's based on an orange grove. But you can do that. You can do that too, because those conditions don't exist for crypto. They don't exist. Pure and simple. Don't. They're not equity stake in anything. They're not a debt stake. You have no claim on anything. Period. End of story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to debate the legal interpretation with you, and and I've voiced my opinion in other contexts that people can look up. Obviously this is an issue that probably will ultimately make it to the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court, yeah, this will be a Supreme Court case.
But the other thing I did wanted to mention though, Jimmy, is Coinbase recently filed last week. They filed a motion for summary judgment in their case again with the SEC.
Right.
And it's pretty interesting. And
you should tell people what summary judgment means, because I don't think commonly people know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I talk a lot about crypto law and issues. I'm not a lawyer, although I've spent my entire
you play
career.
One on TV though.
I play one on TV. Well, I never said I'm a lawyer.
You're always very upfront about that.
Yeah, so I don't want anyone accusing me of misrepresenting my credentials or anything like that. But I have spent my entire career in financial regulation and dealing with a lot of these issues. So, but basically, summary motion, motions for summary, is when both parties essentially agree on the facts of the case, and they're asking the judge to weigh in on a matter of law. So, it's really asking the judge to say, hey, do you agree with our legal interpretation of these agreed upon set of facts? And so what Coinbase is saying is, look, the SEC is alleging that we're operating an unregistered securities exchange and broker-dealer because of these 11 tokens that the SEC in their complaint says are investment contracts according to the Howey test. They say, so there's motion for summary judgment is, okay, these are not investment contracts based upon this legal interpretation that we have. Will you, judge, agree with us, right? And then, in essence, it wouldn't be like a full dismissal of the case unless they agreed with like every aspect of the motion. But that's basically what it is. So you're asking the judge to weigh in on legal interpretation of agreed upon facts. So in the Coinbase case, the reason I bring all this up is not to get into the nitty gritty of what they say, but basically what they say is that, look, there's no contractual, and you sort of alluded to this earlier, there's no contractual relationship here between the purchaser of tokens on Coinbase and Coinbase or any of the issuer of these tokens. And the SEC says, well, listen, the Howey court says it doesn't have to be a contract. It can also be what's known as a scheme. And Coinbase and their attorneys in their summary judgment motion say, well, even if you look at the jurisprudence around that term scheme, there's contracts generally involved, right? So it's, basically if you look at the entire, like there's multiple contracts, right? But when you look at them in their entirety, it's someone giving money to someone else who's investing that with the purpose of generating a return to be distributed to the initial investors. And there's got to be some type of contract along the way. And the SEC is basically, in their opinion, reading out the term contract from the word contract from investment contract. So that's basically what they're like. The SEC is like, there doesn't need to be any contract, implied contract at all. So they disagree with that. But to my point here, the Coinbase motion cites Commissioner Hester Pierce's speech at Digital Assets at Duke, right? So our conference, okay, this is why and we'll tease our conference probably in the next episode.
We should.
But Digital Assets at Duke, you come to our conference, you can hear from the leading minds, right? And you can hear about things that ultimately will make their way into the numerous policy debates and arguments that are going on in this space. So I thought that was pretty cool to see Commissioner Pierce's speech from our conference be cited in that. Be cited in that motion. So well done, Commissioner Pierce. Again, I disagree with you, but it's still I think it's still a testament to the quality of our conference, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I stress over this a lot, and the extreme lengths they're going to try to prove something that is just it's just not necessary. It is just if you want to say this is a different kind of asset, that's probably the safest place to go. But to continue to claim by this basically rogue regulator, the SEC, that this is any kind of security it's just ridiculous. I mean, for anyone who's been in the industry, and who backs up, just 1 foot, you can see, sorry, this is not a security in any way, shape, or form. It's not a derivative in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's just not. And so, and I know, you hold different opinions on it.
Well, but I agree. Let's end on a note of agreement, which is ultimately Congress needs to settle this issue. Yeah. And that's where I agree with you, and I agree with the crypto industry, is that there are gaps, right? Even people agree Bitcoin. Everyone agrees Bitcoin is not a security, okay? So, that gap can only be closed by Congress. And I think all these litigation cases and, judges weighing in on the very, technical details here, it wouldn't need to happen if we had clear regulation stemming from law, from Congress passing a law, right?
It'd be nice if we had some sense of that, right?
That's right. So that means but it gives us content. So
yeah, that's true.
And we will bring that content to you on future episodes of Coffee and Crypto with Lee and Jimmie. I am Lee.
Jimmie. I am Jimmie, and it's great to have everybody here this week. Looking forward to doing it again, Lee.
All right. Take care, Jimmie.
All right. You too.
All right. Get to 100%.
Come on.